the actual Coke can, called a Coke, the kind that we get here, makes its way to Russian shelves through third countries such as Kazakhstan or Georgia. And that's because after the war began and after the European response that made it more difficult to send Western products to Russia, Russia introduced a parallel imports law whereby companies and individuals could bring products into Russia without the trademark holder's consent. So loads of people are presumably making loads and loads of money by being the middleman, a middlewoman, and sending things like Coke and Pepsi into Russia. But on top of that, both Coke and Pepsi said, we're pulling our international brands. But for Coke, it's the local bottler of Coke that stopped making official Coke in the country now makes domestic variants. So it's Добрая Cola is the main one, which is actually now the biggest soda on the market. And now you could argue that Coke doesn't have much control over that, but Coke does own a fifth of HBC, the local bottler. And as for Pepsi, they also have some local brands like Evanes. So they're doing not quite as well in terms of market share, but they're certainly still have a foothold. So, if things change, they'd still have all of those relationships with, a network of retailers, and they could just plug regular Pepsi straight back in whenever they wanted.
Yeah, I suppose, for anyone who has, a mind or an eye to history, this comes with greater weight, doesn't it? The whole idea of Coca-Cola or Levi's or McDonald's or any of those big brands, they went into Russia after communism, and now this issue with sanctions. There's a kind of broader issue here, isn't there, about Western brands within Russia? Yeah,
I mean, those brands, for want of a better word, were iconic in the 90s. People queued up to get their McDonald's and their Pepsi, and it was incredibly exciting to get access to those brands that represented Western prosperity and abundance. And I guess the argument was in some bizarre form, and I don't think it ever really stood up, was somehow that if you take those products away from Russians, they'd be less likely to support the war, which, as I say, it was never a particularly strong argument, but still these companies wanted to take the moral high ground by saying we're pulling out, and in some ways it hasn't worked, and in some ways they haven't done it totally genuinely.
Dasha, in your research and investigating this story, I mean, does the results essentially tell us that sanctions aren't working?
I mean, in the sense that the sanctions aren't designed to specifically target Western consumer brands in Russia. That wasn't the idea of them, and I think there is a sense that there's a reluctance by, for example, Washington to punish American companies for what Putin has done, but there was an idea that if you rein in, if you harm, if you hamstring the Russian economy, that somehow that will cause sort of an awakening, an awareness. And I think a lot of people think it's done the opposite or not done that at all, because the economy is in really good shape, because Putin's spending a lot on social payments, and essentially Russians can get whatever products they want or whatever products they could get before the war.